At 6:12 on a May morning, outside Biggs, California, Lena Morales parked her father's pickup beside a flooded rice field and opened a white cooler full of fish. Not bait, not pets, not some county fair experiment for kids. 2,850 tiny silver fish, flickering against the plastic sides like loose coins in water. Across the gravel road, a fertilizer truck slowed down. Then a second pickup stopped completely, and when Lena lifted the first bucket out of the cooler, one of the men leaned out the window and yelled, "Ray, you growing rice this year, or running an aquarium?" Her father, Ray Morales, did not laugh. He stood on the levee with his cap pulled low and his hands buried in his pockets, looking at the field like it had betrayed him before the season had even started. Lena stepped barefoot into the water. The mud took her to the ankle. The young rice stood in thin green rows, just tall enough to rise above the flood. She walked between them, lowered the bucket until the cooler water kissed the field water, and tipped it slowly. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the fish vanished under the rice, and that was the part nobody on that road understood. Because in that valley, a rice field was supposed to hold rice, water, herbicide, fertilizer, mosquitoes if you were unlucky, and diesel smoke when the equipment came through. It was not supposed to hold a second crew. But Lena had spent 4 years learning that a rice field was never empty. It only looked empty from the road. And by August, the men laughing from their pickups would be asking why the ugliest water in Butte County had the cleanest crop standing in it. Ray Morales had farmed rice for 36 seasons. His father had farmed it before him. And on the Morales place, the rules were simple because the bills were not. You planted when the ground let you. You flooded when the stand could hold it. You sprayed before the weeds got brave. And if the first pass missed, you came back before the field taught you regret. Everyone knew the enemies: watergrass, small flower umbrella sedge, red stem, sprangletop in the wrong corner. Names that sounded harmless until they started stealing yield one blade at a time. By the time Lena was old enough to sit in the passenger seat of the spray rig, she already knew the language men used when they were afraid of a field. They did not call it fear, they called it pressure. Weed pressure, insect pressure, price pressure, fuel pressure, labor pressure. Pressure was the polite word for a system squeezing you from every direction while pretending it was still your choice. Lena listened to those conversations at the coffee counter, at the parts store, outside the mill, and under the shade of open shop doors. The older growers talked about chemical programs the way some families talked about recipes. This much before flood, this much after. This product if the watergrass came early. That one if sedge broke late. And for a long time, it worked well enough. Then, well enough started getting expensive. 1 year a block needed a second rescue pass. The next year the same herbicide looked weaker on the same problem. Consultants said resistance carefully, like it might spread faster if spoken too loud. Ray did not like that word. Nobody who owed money on land liked that word. Lena left for Chico State at 18 and studied plant science, because she wanted official names for problems that had already eaten at her family table. She learned the names. Then she learned the bigger problem. A field was not a flat factory floor. It was a living argument. Water depth argued with sunlight. Mud argued with seed. Insects argued with roots. Timing argued with weather. And every farmer, whether he admitted it or not, was not controlling the field so much as negotiating with it. Her senior year, Lena took a seminar from Dr. Miriam Cho, an agroecologist who had worked with rice fish systems in Asia and small experimental plots in the American West. Dr. Cho never spoke like a person selling a miracle. She hated miracle talk. Biology does not replace management, she told the room. It punishes bad management faster. That line made half the class laugh. Lena wrote it down. Then Dr. Cho showed them how fish could work inside flooded rice when the system was designed correctly. The fish grazed on soft early weeds before they hardened. They hunted insect larvae. They stirred the water and lifted fine sediment into a cloudy veil that cut sunlight at the soil surface. They moved nutrients through the field. They turned floodwater from a parked sheet of water into moving labor. But the rules were brutal. Stock too early, and the rice was too small. Stock too late, and the weeds were already hired. Let water fall too shallow, and the fish suffered. Forget outlet screens, and your system swam into the ditch. Skip refuge trenches, and a hot week could kill the whole idea. Dr. Cho clicked to a photo of a muddy field with cloudy water and a man standing beside it, looking ashamed. During the first season, she said, most people will think you have made the field worse. Lena wrote that down too. By February, she was back at the Morales kitchen table with a map, a budget, and the kind of nervous calm that made Ray suspicious. The map showed the South Block, 24 acres, the low end near the canal. A field Ray complained about every year and planted every year, because land did not stop costing money just because it annoyed you. Lena had marked the inlet, the checks, the drain boxes, 2 low pockets, and a refuge trench she wanted cut along the west levee. Ray stared at the paper. You want to dig a fish ditch in my rice. A refuge trench. That's a fish ditch. It's deeper water for heat stress and drawdown. Ray looked at his wife, Anna, who was drying a skillet at the sink and pretending not to listen. Then he looked back at Lena. And after we dig your fish ditch, what happens? We flood normally. We wait until the rice is tall enough. We stock fingerlings. We screen every outlet. We track weed counts, water clarity, insect samples, fish survival, and input cost. 1 block. 1 season. Ray leaned back. 1 season is still real money. I know. You got a backup program. Yes. You got someone besides a professor telling you this won't make me famous for being stupid. Lena pushed a folder across the table. It had supplier numbers, trench cost, screening diagrams, and a stocking schedule. Ray did not open it right away. He just tapped the cover twice. Then he said, if I say yes, every man in this valley is going to know by breakfast. Lena held his eyes. Then let them watch. Ray gave the smallest breath through his nose. Not a laugh, not approval, a crack in the wall. 3 weeks later, he said yes. By the time the fingerlings arrived, half the valley had an opinion. The loudest belongs to Wade Harlan, owner of Harlan Farm Supply and unofficial judge of other people's mistakes. Wade had a clean gray mustache, a shelf full of product catalogs, and the gift of making doubt sound like wisdom. He had helped farmers through bad springs, broken programs, flood failures, and insect outbreaks for 30 years. People trusted him because he understood risk, and because when a farmer was already nervous, Wade could name that nervousness before the farmer did. When he heard about Lena's plan, he was standing near the counter with 3 growers and a seed rep. He shook his head once and said, "Fish don't read weed labels." The men laughed. Then Wade added, "You want a clean rice field. You run a clean program. You don't drop minnows in the flood and hope they pass a chemistry exam." By noon, the line had traveled farther than any official recommendation ever had. 3 days later, Lena walked into Harlan Farm Supply for replacement screen clips and felt the room change temperature. Wade smiled too kindly. "Lena," he said, "heard you're trying something different on the South Block." "I am." "Your dad comfortable with that?" It was his field to approve. "That isn't what I asked." She set the clips on the counter. Wade leaned one forearm down. "Listen, I hope it works. I do. But rice doesn't care how interesting an idea is. You miss one weed window in June, and that field will get away from you while everybody is still admiring your fish. I know. You have rescue chemistry ready? Yes. Good. Wade rang up the clips. Because biology is cute until watergrass gets tall. Lena carried the clips out without answering. Then she drove straight to the south block and checked every screen twice. June came hot, then humid, then mean. A week of still nights settled over the valley. The kind of nights when the water did not seem to cool, the air did not move, and everything green found permission to grow. In fields all over the area, weeds broke through places growers thought were clean. Watergrass thickened along shallow edges, sedge pushed through flooded corners. Sprays that should have held began looking tired. Wade's phone started ringing before daylight. By June 19th, men were talking about second passes, missed timing, resistant patches, extra fuel, extra labor, and whether anyone remembered a season where the ground seemed this stubborn this early. The south block had weeds too. Lena did not pretend otherwise. That would have been the fastest way to lose Ray's trust. The northeast check had a strip of watergrass where a gate had leaked and dropped the flood 2 inches for almost 40 hours. She marked it, photographed it, counted it, then wrote the failure in her notebook exactly the way it happened. Dr. Cho had taught her that belief was useless in a field. Records were not. So every morning before the heat rose, Lena walked the same route. She checked water depth at 7 stakes. She photographed the same 4 corners. She dropped a white turbidity tube into the flood. She used a square PVC frame to count visible wheat seedlings. She took dip samples near the refuge trench and logged mosquito larvae, midge larvae, and anything else that moved. She checked the fish at dawn, when the surface was quiet. At first she saw nothing. Then she learned to stand still. A little flash between rows. A ripple against the levee. Tiny noses working the mud, lifting brown clouds behind them. By late June, the south block looked wrong to anyone who wanted pretty water. The flood was not mirror clear. It was tea-colored and soft, with suspended silt. The rice stood green and straight, but the field looked busy, restless, almost dirty. Ray hated looking at it from the road. Every clean field in the valley shines, he muttered one evening. Lena looked over the cloudy water. Maybe shine isn't the goal. Ray turned to her. You sure about that? No, she said. That answer did more for her than confidence would have. Because Ray trusted uncertainty when it came with measurements. By July 8th, the numbers began to separate. Lena had fenced off a 1-acre comparison pocket with the same rice, same water, same planting date, same soil, and no fish. Not perfect science. Farm science. The kind you can afford. The no-fish pocket carried more new watergrass after flood establishment. The fish block showed fewer small seedlings after the water stabilized. The turbidity stayed higher where the fish worked. Dip samples near the trench showed lower larval counts. The rice itself looked even. That was the only part Ray cared about at first. The crop had not yellowed. It had not thinned. It had not fallen behind. It was standing. And in a year when other farmers were scheduling extra passes, Lena skipped one herbicide treatment on the managed portion of the south block. Not every chemical. Not the whole farm. One treatment. One block. One real reduction. Wade Harlan drove past that block 4 times in 9 days. The first time he did not slow. The second time he slowed enough for Lena to see his company logo on the door. The third time he stopped at the ditch, got out, looked for maybe 30 seconds, and drove away without waving. The fourth time, Ray's phone rang before supper. Ray listened, said very little, then came back into the shop where Lena was repairing a cracked spray nozzle she hoped not to need. Wade wants to walk the south block. Lena kept her eyes on the nozzle. When? Tomorrow. She nodded. Ray waited. You got something smart to say. Lena wiped her thumb across the brass fitting. No. Then she looked up. Bring his boots. Wade arrived at 7 o'clock the next morning in jeans too clean for a man who planned to stay on the levee. Within 10 minutes the cuffs were muddy. Lena showed him the inlet screen first, then the drain boxes, then the refuge trench, where the water ran deeper and cooler along the west side. She explained the stocking date, the fish size, the water depth target, the backup chemical plan, and the comparison pocket. Wade listened without performing for anyone. That surprised her. He asked about dissolved oxygen. He asked about water exchange during the hot spell. He asked how much labor the morning checks added. Then he crouched beside the flood. A small silver body flicked near the surface and disappeared. Wade narrowed his eyes. They grew. They eat. How much did you skip? One herbicide application in the fish manage section. Not the field. No. Not the farm. No. Just that section. Yes. Wade reached for the clipboard. Lena handed it to him. He read the week counts. Then turned back a page. Then another. Same frames. Same frame size. Same locations. Marked stakes. Photos from the same angle. Every time. Wade looked at the field again. Then he gave one short nod. Not apology. Not conversion. But the first crack in certainty. Harvest settled the argument better than any meeting could. The South Block did not produce a miracle. That was important. A miracle would have made people suspicious. The rice from the fish-managed acres came in slightly stronger than the no-fish pocket, with lower corrective input cost and one fewer field pass. The fish survival was good enough to sell a small end-of-season haul to a local live market. Not enough to make Ray rich, enough to matter on paper. When Lena finished the budget, the result was not dramatic. It was more dangerous than dramatic. It was believable. Per acre, the margin was modest but real. Chemical cost down, diesel down, labor up. Risk different, not gone. The field had not proven that fish replaced farming. It had proven that farming had been leaving one worker out of the crew. Ray read the final report at the kitchen table. 31 pages, charts, photos, mistakes, costs, everything. He took longer on the pages that showed failure than on the pages that showed profit. Finally, he closed the folder and tapped it twice, the same way he had tapped her proposal in February. Do not show this to people unless you're ready for them to ask you hard questions. I know. You sure you want that? Lena looked out the window toward the South Block, now drained and stubbled after harvest. No, she said. Ray almost smiled. Good. Then you might be ready. She took one copy to Wade. At Harlan Farm Supply, the counter went quiet again, but this time it was not the old kind of quiet. Wade saw the folder under her arm. That the fish report? It is. You sharing it? Lena held it for a second longer than necessary. You can read it. I want it back. One of the growers made a low whistle. Wade put his hand on the folder. Fair. 2 nights later, he called. No greeting. I read it. Lena waited. The silence stretched. Then Wade said, if a man wanted to try this on 40 acres instead of 24, what breaks first? Lena leaned against the sink. Water control. After that, outlet screens. After that, refuge design. Then timing. Then whether he is honest enough to write down what fails. Wade was quiet for a moment. That's not a sales pitch. I'm not selling it. No, he said. I can tell. The next spring, 2 growers tried small rice fish blocks. Small ones. Because farmers are not reckless people. They may argue. They may mock. They may pretend not to listen. But when proof arrives with a budget attached, they move one measured acre at a time. One grower stocked too early and lost too many fish. Another underestimated how fast a ditch screen could clog with cut grass after a windstorm. Lena's own second-year block nearly crashed during a July heat wave when oxygen dropped near dawn, and she had to move water in the dark, while mosquitoes chewed through her shirt. She wrote all of it down. Because a farm story that only keeps the winning parts is not a farm story. By the third season, the idea was no longer funny, not normal, not easy, not universal, just no longer funny. Wade stopped saying fish don't read weed labels. Instead, when growers came in complaining about watergrass pressure, he started asking different questions. How steady is your flood? How good are your outlets? Can you hold water without chasing leaks all week? Are you willing to count weeds before you argue about them? Some men noticed the change. Some did not. Ray noticed. That was enough. In January, the county extension office asked Lena to speak at a winter rice meeting in Gridley. She said no. Ray said, "You made me listen at my own table. You can make them listen in folding chairs." So she went. 78 people sat in a room that smelled like coffee, wet jackets, and winter mud. Farmers in caps, consultants with notebooks, a few students from the university. Wade sat in the back row with his arms crossed, not holding court. Lena stood beside a projector, wearing jeans, work boots, and a blue work shirt with a faint mud stain on one cuff because she had checked a field before driving over. She started with the photo from that first morning, the white cooler, the flooded rows, Ray on the levee, looking like a man watching property values decline in real time. The room laughed. Lena let them. Then she showed the weed counts, the turbidity readings, the comparison pocket, the input costs, the fish survival, the heat wave oxygen scare, the clogged screens, the strip of watergrass from the leaked gate, especially the failures. Because the failures were where the system stopped being a story and became something a serious farmer could judge. Halfway through questions, an older grower raised his hand. "What are you supposed to do when everybody driving by thinks you've lost your mind?" The room chuckled. Lena looked down at her notes. Then she closed the folder. "You measure anyway." The room got still. She said, "The first year, people are not looking at your system. They're looking at their fear of what might happen if the old system stops working. They see cloudy water and call it dirty. They see fish and call it a gimmick. They see one different decision and think you're insulting every decision they ever made." But the field does not care who feels insulted. It responds to depth, timing, heat, sunlight, mud, roots, larvae, and pressure. So you measure. You admit what failed. You fix what you can. And if the numbers keep answering, you keep asking better questions. No one laughed after that. They asked different questions. How deep was the trench? How fine were the screens? How did she drain without losing the fish? Would it work in heavier soil? How much labor did it add? What would she not repeat? What did Ray think? Lena answered every question she could. When the room emptied, Wade walked to the front. "Good talk," he said. "Thank you." He looked at the blank projector screen. "I shouldn't have said that thing at the counter." Lena knew exactly which thing. Fish don't read weed labels. She packed the last cable into her bag. "You came to look," she said. "Most people only drove by." Wade gave one nod. Then he said, "I've got a grower east of town with ugly watergrass and better water control than he deserves. Might be a fit. Only if he'll keep records." Wade smiled. "I knew you were going to say that." Ray was waiting near the back with 2 paper cups of coffee. When Lena walked over, he handed her one. "Your fish ditch got complicated," he said. That was as close as Ray came to saying he was proud. It was enough. The following spring, Lena's younger cousin Mateo spread a map across the Morales kitchen table. He was 21, home from community college, still too eager to hide it well. The map showed a low field near the canal, divided into zones. There were notes about winter cover, shallow wetland strips, insect habitat, and carrying small fish refuges through more of the year. Ray stood at the stove pouring coffee. He looked at the map, then at Lena. Mateo cleared his throat.
I was thinking, maybe the fish are not the whole system. Maybe we can build the crew earlier, before rice. With cover, water pockets, insects, I don't know. Maybe it's dumb. Lena stared at the map. For a moment, she was back on the levee with a bucket in her hands and laughter coming from the road. She remembered Ray saying every man in the valley would know by breakfast. She remembered Wade reading her numbers twice before calling.
She remembered the ugly water, the clean stand, the mosquitoes, the mistakes, the first small profit that was not large enough to impress outsiders, and just large enough to change a farmer's mind. Then she looked at Mateo. Have you pulled baseline counts? He blinked. Not yet. So start there. Soil, weeds, insects, water. 3 zones minimum. Before you change anything. Mateo tried not to smile. So you think it's worth testing? Lena picked up the map. It's worth asking the field. Outside the window, the south block was flooded again. From the house, it looked ordinary. Just rice pushing through water under a pale spring sky. You could not see the small bodies moving below the surface. You could not see the silt rising where mouths worked the mud. You could not see the hidden labor that had made men slow their trucks, then stop, then walk the levee with real questions. From the road the field still looked like a rice field. That was the part everyone had missed. Lena had not turned it into something else, she had only stopped treating it like it was empty. And when June came hot, when the weeds pushed hard, when the old answers got more expensive, the second crew went to work. The water turned cloudy, the rice stood, the notebook held. And under the surface, where nobody could judge it from the road, the field was already answering.